words sliced through the morning air like shattered glass. "I don't love him, Jane. He's just a substitute until Nick comes back." In that single moment, as Aaron Clark stood frozen in his own hallway, the immaculate facade of his 7-year marriage collapsed like a house built on quicksand. What he did next would not only reshape his own destiny, but would send his unfaithful wife spiraling into an abyss so dark she might never find her way back to the light. The California morning sun slipped through the large windows of Aaron and Melissa Clark's suburban home, bathing their pristine kitchen in golden light. They looked like the perfect couple, exchanging smiles over gourmet coffee, sharing a lingering kiss before work, their movements synchronized after 7 years of marriage. But beneath Melissa's practiced smile, in the depths of her azure eyes, lurked a cold weariness that Aaron had been too preoccupied to notice. Aaron, a former military intelligence officer turned successful security analyst at a prestigious private firm, lived by discipline and calculated precision. His day ran with clockwork predictability, rigorous workout at 5 a.m., protein-rich breakfast with Melissa at 7, arriving at his downtown office by 8:30. Their life appeared flawless from every angle. A stunning 2-story colonial in San Francisco's most exclusive neighborhood, weekend retreats at Napa Valley Vineyards, and dinner parties with the city's elite social circle. The enviable couple that others whispered about with barely concealed jealousy. He had absolutely no idea that in just a few hours, the meticulously constructed foundation of his existence would shatter into unrecognizable fragments. "Have a productive day, sweetheart," Melissa called out, her voice honeyed and practiced as she handed him his monogram travel mug. Her expertly highlighted blonde hair caught the morning sunlight, forming a halo effect that made her look almost angelic in her designer silk blouse. Aaron smiled appreciatively, kissed her on the cheek, and walked out the door, sliding into his midnight blue Tesla with practiced ease. But today wasn't destined to follow the comforting rhythm of routine. Aaron's quarterly review meeting with Westbrook Industries had been unexpectedly canceled. Something about the CEO's daughter being rushed to emergency surgery. Rather than squander the valuable morning hours at the office, Aaron made an impromptu decision to return home and surprise Melissa. Perhaps they could enjoy an intimate lunch together, something they hadn't indulged in for nearly 6 months due to their increasingly divergent schedules. As he navigated the curved driveway of their estate, Aaron noticed Jane's unmistakable cherry red Porsche, Melissa's closest confidant since their Stanford days. They were probably sharing coffee and exchanging gossip, as was their Wednesday tradition. Aaron smiled to himself, anticipating their surprised reactions to his unexpected appearance. He opened the heavy mahogany front door silently, having disengaged the notification chime on his phone-linked security system. Melodious voices drifted from the kitchen, the familiar cadence of animated conversation between the two women. Aaron was about to announce his presence when Melissa's words stopped him cold, freezing him in place as effectively as if he'd been submerged in Arctic waters. "I don't love him, Jane. I haven't felt anything real for years." Melissa's voice rang with unmistakable clarity, slicing through the morning air with surgical precision. "It's exhausting pretending every single day." Aaron stood motionless in the marble-floored entryway, his hand still gripping the polished door handle, his breathing suddenly shallow and controlled as his military training automatically engaged. The moment transported him back to a mission gone wrong in Damascus, the same crystalline clarity washing over him as it had when he discovered their extraction point was compromised, requiring immediate recalibration of every plan he'd made. "Then why maintain this charade?" Jane challenged, her voice tinged with unmistakable judgment. "You've been visibly miserable for at least 3 years. I've watched you slowly dying inside while maintaining that perfect society wife facade. Aaron's just a substitute, a temporary shelter until Nick returns from his New York assignment." Melissa replied, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that Aaron had to strain to hear. "Nick called yesterday evening. His contract with Goldman ends in exactly 3 months, and he's already secured a senior position at Montgomery Financial here in San Francisco." Aaron felt an icy sensation spreading through his chest cavity, radiating outward until his fingertips tingled with numbness. His facial expression remained absolutely neutral, a skill that had saved his life during classified interrogation training at Quantico. His mind replayed countless moments, The way Melissa had increasingly withdrawn from their intimate life, her sudden interest in overnight wellness retreats, the mysterious text messages that made her smile in ways he hadn't witnessed in years. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. And then what happens? Jane sounded skeptical. You'll just discard 7 years of marriage like last season's handbag collection? Then I'll finally tell Aaron the truth and divorce him. Nick's always been the one I truly wanted, my soulmate. After Nick relocated to New York, I was completely devastated. Aaron appeared at precisely the right moment. Reliable, adoring, financially secure. The quintessential rebound relationship that somehow evolved into marriage before I fully realized what was happening. Aaron experienced something transformative spreading through his consciousness. Not explosive rage or crippling heartbreak, but rather a crystalline clarity that he'd only encountered once before, during a particularly perilous extraction operation in Damascus years earlier. His mind achieved razor-sharp focus, his emotions efficiently compartmentalized into accessible but non-interfering segments. But what about everything Aaron sacrificed and provided for you? This magnificent house, your extravagant lifestyle, the connections he's cultivated for your interior design business? Your entire life is built on his foundation. Jane's voice carried undisguised reproach. Melissa laughed dismissively, a sound that Aaron had once found melodious but now registered as hauntingly hollow. That's all just superficial trappings, Jane. Nick makes me feel truly alive, passionate, spontaneous, desired. Aaron's become insufferably predictable, so rigidly structured. Even our most intimate moments feel meticulously choreographed according to some internal schedule. He approaches lovemaking with the same methodical efficiency he applies to quarterly reports. Aaron's mind flashed back to their anniversary 3 months ago, how he'd arranged a private dinner at Melissa's favorite restaurant, presented her with diamond earrings she'd been subtly hinting about, made love to her with what he thought was passionate attentiveness. Had she been mentally elsewhere the entire time? Had she been comparing his every touch, every whispered endearment, to memories of Nick? The thought sent a wave of nausea through him that he suppressed through sheer force of will. Have you actually been physically unfaithful? Jane didn't complete the explicit accusation. With Nick, every possible opportunity when he visits San Francisco, Melissa admitted without a trace of remorse or hesitation. Remember last month when I claimed to be attending that exclusive wellness retreat in Ojai? I was actually with Nick at the Fairmont in San Diego. The connection between us is absolutely incendiary. The kind of passion that makes everything with Aaron feel like a pale imitation. The revelation struck Aaron with the force of a physical blow. The Ojai retreat, he'd encouraged her to go, believing she needed relaxation, even arranging for a special spa package as a surprise. He'd spent those 3 days working extra hours, thinking he was supporting his wife's well-being, while she laughed at his naivety in another man's bed. Doesn't it bother you at all? Jane persisted. The lying, the betrayal. Aaron worships the ground you walk on. There was a brief pause before Melissa responded. Sometimes, when he does something thoughtful that reminds me of the man I married. But then I remember how suffocated I feel, how every day is exactly like the one before, how I have to suppress who I really am to fit into his perfectly organized world. And who exactly are you, Melissa? Jane's voice had taken on an edge Aaron had never heard before. Because from where I'm sitting, you're someone having an affair while your husband supports your business, your lifestyle, and thinks you're at a wellness retreat when you're sleeping with another man. You don't understand, Melissa's voice had hardened defensively. Aaron and I haven't genuinely connected in years. We're essentially roommates who occasionally have sex. Nick and I have something real, something transcendent. Does Nick's wife know about this transcendent connection? Jane asked pointedly. Aaron's heart seemed to stop. Nick was married? The betrayal suddenly expanded exponentially. Nick doesn't love her, Melissa dismissed quickly. They married for convenience. She was pregnant, and his family has traditional values. They've been essentially separated for over a year, just keeping up appearances until their divorce is finalized. Aaron experienced another internal shift, not blind fury or debilitating anguish, but rather an almost transcendent detachment that allowed him to process her betrayal with remarkable objectivity. His analytical mind began calculating variables and potential outcomes with machine-like efficiency. He retreated silently, closing the massive front door with exquisite precision to avoid detection. Returning to his vehicle, Aaron sat motionless for several minutes, his manicured hands resting lightly on the premium leather steering wheel, his breathing deliberately measured and controlled. The military had taught him one invaluable lesson that would serve him now. When ambushed, don't react immediately. Assess, plan, then execute with precision. Emotion was the enemy of effective strategy. Then he activated the ignition and drove away, not toward his corporate office, but in the direction of his private sanctuary, a secluded waterfront cabin he'd purchased as an investment property 3 years earlier. Melissa had expressed immediate disdain for the location, dismissing it as unsophisticated and embarrassingly rustic, despite its multi-million-dollar valuation. He'd maintained ownership nonetheless, occasionally retreating there for solitary reflection. The cabin stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, its weathered cedar exterior belying the sophisticated interior. Aaron entered the space, breathing in the scent of wood and ocean. He moved to the expansive windows facing the sea, watching waves crash against the rocks below. For the first time since hearing Melissa's words, he allowed himself to feel the full impact of her betrayal. A memory surfaced, their wedding day 7 years earlier. Melissa, radiant in white lace, tears glistening as she promised to love him forever. Had she been thinking of Nick even then? Had any of it ever been real? The pain that crashed through him was physically debilitating, driving him to his knees on the hardwood floor. For exactly 15 minutes, Aaron permitted himself to experience the raw agony of betrayal, the humiliation, the rage, the profound sense of loss. He sobbed openly, his body shaking with the force of emotions he typically kept rigorously controlled. Then, with military precision, he checked his watch. 15 minutes had passed. Emotional release complete. Time for strategic planning. Aaron rose, wiped his face, and moved to the reclaimed wood table that served as his desk. He opened his laptop and began making notes, organizing his thoughts with methodical precision. By the time the sun began setting over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of orange and gold, he had formulated his response. That evening, Aaron returned home at his customary time, greeting Melissa with his habitual affectionate kiss. She inquired about his workday. He provided his standard response with perfect inflection. If she detected any microscopic variation in his behavior, she betrayed no awareness. He observed her with heightened perception, noting the subtle tension in her graceful shoulders when his smartphone chimed with notifications. The furtive way her gaze darted to the screen, attempting to identify the sender. Following dinner, he withdrew to his handsomely appointed home office, ostensibly to address urgent work correspondence. Instead, he initiated the development of an elaborate strategic response. The following morning, Aaron contacted his longtime friend Daniel Rothschild, who happened to be among California's most formidable divorce attorneys with an unmatched record of favorable settlements. "I require absolute confidentiality regarding this matter, Daniel," Aaron stated, his voice controlled and deliberately modulated. "You've always had my professional discretion," Daniel assured him. "What critical situation has developed?" Aaron methodically explained the circumstances without emotional embellishment, presenting the devastating facts as though delivering a corporate intelligence briefing. Daniel released a low, sympathetic whistle. "That's extraordinarily callous, my friend. I'm genuinely sorry you're experiencing this betrayal. However, you've definitely consulted the appropriate legal counsel. I intend to handle this situation properly, Daniel, not motivated by vengeance or emotional retaliation, driven exclusively by self-preservation and personal dignity. I comprehend completely. Here's our immediate strategic approach." Throughout the subsequent week, Aaron meticulously implemented Daniel's expert recommendations. He systematically gathered comprehensive financial documentation, created duplicate records of joint account statements, and discreetly transferred exactly 50% of their combined savings into a newly established private account. Precisely half, not a fraction more. His intention wasn't to financially penalize Melissa, merely to safeguard his rightful assets. He also began documenting Melissa's daily activities with clinical precision, noting her increasingly frequent unexplained absences, The suspicious calls she conducted in hushed tones behind closed doors. The secretive text messages she composed when she believed he was otherwise occupied. One evening, as Aaron sat reviewing financial statements in his home office, a memory surfaced of the day he had proposed to Melissa. They'd been hiking in Muir Woods, and he'd arranged for a picnic in a secluded clearing among the towering redwoods. He'd presented the ring, a family heirloom from his grandmother, and Melissa had cried, throwing her arms around him and whispering how she'd never loved anyone the way she loved him. Had it all been theater? A convenient performance while she waited for something better? The thought triggered a wave of anger so intense that Aaron found himself gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. He closed his eyes, employing the meditation techniques he'd learned during military service. 3 deep breaths. Identify the emotion, acknowledge it, release it, focus on the objective. 12 days after inadvertently discovering the devastating conversation, Aaron received an anonymous text message. Nick Anderson arriving SFO tomorrow, United Flight 1557, 3:12 p.m. Reserve presidential suite at Fairmont for 3 nights. Thought you deserved this information. Someone who recognizes your worth. The message surprised him. He hadn't shared his situation with anyone beyond Daniel. Someone else had noticed, had connected the dots. It was both comforting and disturbing to realize his humiliation might not be as private as he'd thought. Aaron contemplated the message extensively before contacting his former college roommate, Haley James. Haley had established herself as a prominent clinical psychologist with a thriving practice in Sacramento specializing in relationship trauma. They had briefly explored romantic involvement during university before mutually recognizing their exceptional compatibility as lifelong friends instead. They had maintained consistent communication throughout their adult lives, supporting each other through various personal challenges. She represented one of the exceedingly few individuals Aaron trusted implicitly with his vulnerability. "Well, this is an unexpected pleasure," she answered warmly. "What extraordinary circumstance prompts this midweek communication?" "I require substantial assistance, Hay, something significantly beyond ordinary friendship obligations. Would you consider coming to San Francisco for approximately 1 week?" A momentary silence followed. "This sounds genuinely concerning. Are you currently safe and stable?" "Not particularly," Aaron admitted, allowing the first perceptible fracture in his composed exterior. "However, I fully intend to be eventually." Aaron explained the situation, his voice remaining steady until he reached the part about the wellness retreat. Then for the first time, his composure cracked. "I actually called the spa to make sure they prepared her favorite herbal tea in the room," he said, a bitter laugh escaping him. "I wanted her to feel special." Haley's voice softened with compassion. "Oh, Aaron, I'm so sorry. Will you help me?" he asked simply. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," she promised without hesitation. The following afternoon, Haley checked into a luxury suite at the Fairmont, strategically located on the same exclusive floor as Nick's presidential accommodation. Aaron had thoroughly briefed her regarding the situation, showing her recent photographs of both Nick and Melissa, obtained from social media accounts. "You absolutely shouldn't feel obligated to participate," Aaron had emphasized. "I recognize this represents an extraordinary imposition on our friendship." Haley had dismissively shaken her head. "What Melissa's orchestrating constitutes profound emotional abuse, Aaron. You unquestionably deserve better treatment. Additionally, I'm professionally curious about individuals capable of such calculated deception in supposedly committed relationships." At precisely 3:27 p.m., Haley transmitted a concise text to Aaron. "Subject has arrived and completed check-in procedures. Suite 1422. Aaron, positioned in his vehicle across the boulevard, responded with characteristic brevity. "Confirmation appreciated." He sat watching the hotel entrance, half expecting to see Melissa arrive immediately. Instead, nearly 2 hours passed before her silver Audi pulled up to the valet stand. Aaron watched as his wife emerged, wearing a dress he'd never seen before, a tight-fitting red number that she would have considered too provocative for their social circle. Her hair was styled differently, her makeup heavier than usual. The physical transformation was jarring. This wasn't the Melissa he knew. This was someone else entirely, a stranger wearing his wife's face. He watched as she practically floated into the hotel, excitement visible in her every movement. Aaron sat motionless, experiencing a curious sense of detachment as he observed this alternate version of his wife rushing into another man's arms. He had expected to feel rage, jealousy, perhaps even the urge to confront them. Instead, he felt only a profound emptiness, as though watching characters in a film that no longer held any emotional significance for him. At approximately 6:45 p.m., Melissa informed Aaron she had arranged an impromptu dinner and movie engagement with Jane. Aaron nodded agreeably, kissed her cheek affectionately, and mentioned having substantial quarterly projections requiring attention regardless. "Don't wait up," Melissa called over her shoulder as she left, a lightness in her voice he hadn't heard in years. "These art films Jane loves tend to run late." "Enjoy yourself," Aaron replied calmly, noting the fresh perfume she wore, another unfamiliar element in this theater of deception. 23 minutes after Melissa's departure, Haley initiated contact. "They've just entered the hotel's signature restaurant together," she reported clinically. "Her entire demeanor has transformed, Aaron. She appears genuinely radiant with happiness. I regret being the messenger of such painful confirmation." "Is he wearing a wedding ring?" Aaron asked, his voice neutral. A pause. "Yes. Platinum band. Left hand." Aaron momentarily closed his eyes, processing this final verification. "Please don't apologize. This represents precisely the conclusive evidence I required for absolute certainty." "What subsequent action do you intend?" Haley inquired. "We proceed to implementation stage 2, Aaron responded decisively. "Are you still comfortable continuing your involvement?" "Absolutely committed to seeing this through." That night, alone in their king-size bed, Aaron stared at the ceiling, reflecting on the strange duality of his existence. On one side, the facade of a perfect marriage maintained through Melissa's elaborate deceptions. On the other, the devastating reality he now inhabited, planning the systematic dismantling of the life they had built together. He reached for his phone, opening their photo album. 7 years of carefully documented happiness. Vacations, anniversaries, holiday celebrations. He scrolled through image after image of Melissa smiling beside him, wondering which moments had been genuine and which had been performed for the camera while her heart belonged elsewhere. Aaron stopped on a particular photo, their 5th anniversary trip to Hawaii, Melissa standing on a beach at sunset, laughing as waves crashed around her ankles. He remembered taking the picture, thinking he'd never seen anything more beautiful than his wife illuminated by the golden light of the setting sun. Had she been thinking of Nick even then? Had she been wishing for a different man beside her on that perfect beach? The thought should have been agonizing, but Aaron found himself examining it with clinical detachment, like analyzing a particularly complex security breach. In the morning, Haley sent him several photos she had discreetly captured. Melissa and Nick sharing an intimate dinner, holding hands across the table, laughing with the easy familiarity of longtime lovers. The final image showed them entering the elevator together, Melissa pressed against Nick's side, his arm possessively around her waist. The subsequent morning, Aaron informed Melissa about an urgent client situation requiring his immediate presence in Seattle for approximately 48 hours. She displayed minimal interest in this development, remaining absorbed with her smartphone communication. "Travel safely," she murmured distractedly, without establishing eye contact. Once alone, Melissa immediately called Nick, her voice breathless with excitement. "He's going to Seattle for 2 days. We can spend the entire time together." She didn't notice the small surveillance device Aaron had placed beneath her vanity, another skill acquired during his military service that now served an unexpected purpose. That evening, Haley attended an exclusive art exhibition at a prominent local gallery, an event she had confirmed Melissa would attend through Aaron's detailed knowledge of his wife's meticulously maintained social calendar. Haley strategically positioned herself near the champagne station, wearing a striking crimson designer dress that commanded attention without appearing deliberately conspicuous. As anticipated, Melissa eventually approached to request refreshment. Haley orchestrated an apparently accidental collision. "Please accept my sincere apology," Haley exclaimed convincingly, reaching out to stabilize Melissa's arm. "Completely my responsibility. Please allow me to replace your beverage immediately." Melissa offered a perfunctory smile. "Unnecessary. No harm occurred." I absolutely insist, Haley persisted, signaling the attentive server. I'm Haley Davidson, incidentally. She had deliberately selected a fabricated surname to prevent future complications. Melissa Clark, came the reluctant introduction. Throughout the subsequent 45 minutes, Haley expertly deployed her psychological training, asking carefully crafted questions that encouraged Melissa to discuss herself extensively. Laughing with precise timing, creating a convincingly authentic impression of spontaneous connection. What brings you to this particular exhibition? Haley inquired casually. My husband's corporation maintains business relationships with the gallery proprietor, Melissa explained dismissively, although he's currently away on business travel. Professional obligations taking him elsewhere? Yes, Seattle specifically. Some alleged client emergency requiring immediate attention. Melissa's tone clearly conveyed her complete disinterest in her husband's professional responsibilities. My former husband constantly disappeared to address supposed urgent business matters as well, Haley commented sympathetically. Although retrospectively, I suspect approximately half those emergencies were creatively embellished excuses. Melissa laughed appreciatively, visibly relaxing further. Men and their supposedly indispensable professional commitments. By evening's conclusion, Haley had successfully established herself as a potential new confidant, identifying herself as a visiting pharmaceutical consultant temporarily stationed in San Francisco for several weeks. They exchanged contact information, with Haley suggesting casual lunch arrangements in the near future. Initial connection successfully established, Haley messaged Aaron later that evening. Subject displays zero suspicion regarding authentic intentions. Aaron sat in his hotel room in Seattle. He'd actually flown there to maintain the veracity of his cover story. Looking at Haley's message, a wave of gratitude washed over him for her friendship. In the midst of this personal catastrophe, at least he wasn't completely alone. He walked to the window, gazing out at the Seattle skyline illuminated against the night sky. 7 years of marriage dissolving into a carefully orchestrated charade. He thought of the children he and Melissa had discussed having someday, children that would now never exist. He thought of the retirement they had planned, the future anniversaries they would never celebrate, the lifetime of shared memories they would never create. For a moment, the weight of these accumulated losses threatened to overwhelm him. But Aaron had survived war zones and life-threatening operations. He had endured physical and psychological challenges designed to break the strongest individuals. This was simply another mission, perhaps the most personal and painful one of his life, but a mission nonetheless. And Aaron had never failed a mission. 2 days later, Aaron returned from his fabricated Seattle engagement. That same afternoon, Haley contacted Melissa with a spontaneous lunch invitation. Over the subsequent 8 days, Haley and Melissa met on 3 separate occasions, with Haley strategically revealing carefully selected personal information calculated to encourage Melissa's reciprocal disclosure. During their 4th luncheon, Haley mentioned with practiced casualness, I'm scheduled to meet a professional colleague later today, Nick Anderson. Perhaps you're acquainted. He mentioned connections throughout the local artistic community. Melissa's reaction, though subtle, was unmistakable to Haley's trained observation. A momentary muscular rigidity, a rapidly darting gaze indicating heightened alertness. Nick Anderson? The name doesn't immediately register, she responded, consuming an unusually large portion of her Chardonnay. Tall gentleman, dark wavy hair, transferred from New York? Financial sector professional? Haley pressed delicately. Oh, that particular Nick. Yes, we've likely encountered each other at various functions, Melissa acknowledged with studied indifference. I wasn't aware he had returned to San Francisco. Temporarily, according to his communication, Haley explained dismissively. These financial executives maintain perpetually transient lifestyles. As Haley reported this conversation to Aaron later, she added her professional assessment. She's panicking beneath that composed exterior. The mention of Nick's name triggered a classic autonomic stress response. Pupil dilation, micro-expressions indicating fear, increased respiratory rate. She's terrified of being discovered. Later that evening, Aaron received an urgent communication from Melissa. Requires serious conversation upon your arrival home. Extremely important. He deliberately refrained from responding. When he eventually returned home, Melissa awaited him, pacing anxiously across their expansive living room. She glanced up immediately upon his entrance, her expression betraying unmistakable distress. "Has something concerning occurred?" Aaron inquired with convincing solicitude. "I've recently connected with someone," Melissa began cautiously. "A woman named Haley, recently arrived in San Francisco." "That seems pleasant," Aaron responded neutrally, loosening his Italian silk necktie. "She mentioned acquaintance with someone named Nick Anderson, indicated plans to meet him subsequently." Aaron raised a questioning eyebrow. "Should that name hold significance for me?" Melissa hesitated noticeably. "Absolutely not. Simply someone I've encountered occasionally at various social gatherings. Barely familiar with him personally." Aaron nodded thoughtfully, observing her reactions with heightened perception. "Understood. Was that the urgent matter requiring discussion?" "Not exactly," Melissa struggled visibly with articulation. "I've been contemplating our relationship extensively, our marital situation specifically." "Which aspects particularly?" "Are you experiencing genuine fulfillment, Aaron? Authentic contentment with our current circumstances?" Aaron deliberately settled onto their designer sofa, regarding her with unwavering attention. "What specific concerns have prompted this sudden introspection, Melissa?" "I simply sense growing emotional distance between us, perhaps fundamentally divergent priorities developing." "What precisely do you desire currently, Melissa?" Aaron questioned, his tone gentle despite his penetrating gaze. She averted her eyes conspicuously. "Uncertain precisely. Perhaps greater spontaneity, reduced predictability in our daily interactions." "I comprehend." Aaron stood decisively. "I believe I'll shower immediately. Today's obligations have been particularly demanding." He departed, leaving her standing confused by his uncharacteristically minimal reaction. That night, lying beside him in their king-size bed, Melissa initiated physical contact, her hand moving suggestively along his muscular thigh. They hadn't engaged intimately for nearly 3 months. "Not this evening," Aaron stated quietly, gently removing her hand. "Early executive presentation tomorrow morning." The visible hurt and astonishment transforming her features provided Aaron with the first genuine emotional satisfaction since discovering her betrayal. The following day, Haley contacted Melissa, projecting convincing emotional disturbance. "You won't believe the disturbing interaction I experienced," she began, her voice deliberately tremulous. "I met with Nick as planned, and he immediately began interrogating me extensively about you." "Specifically about me?" Melissa's voice betrayed unmistakable anxiety. "Precisely. When I mentioned our casual lunches, his demeanor became intensely focused. He demanded detailed information regarding your comments about him, inquired whether you had discussed your husband extensively." Profound silence filled the connection. "Melissa, are you still connected?" "What information did you disclose?" Melissa finally responded. "Absolutely nothing substantial. Our acquaintance remains relatively superficial, and the entire interaction felt disconcertingly inappropriate. I fabricated an excuse and departed promptly. However, I felt obligated to inform you. Is everything secure? Should legitimate concerns exist?" "No immediate danger," Melissa quickly assured her. "Simply a misunderstanding. Nick represents an established acquaintance. We share complicated history." "My goodness," Haley gasped dramatically. "Were you previously romantically involved?" "The situation defies simple explanation," Melissa replied evasively. "Please maintain absolute confidentiality regarding this conversation." "Unquestionably. However, Melissa, is your marital relationship stable? Because from external perspective, this situation appears potentially problematic." "Must terminate this call," Melissa interrupted abruptly. "We'll contact you subsequently." Within minutes, Aaron received multiple urgent messages from Melissa. "Require immediate consultation. Coming to your office location. Confirm your availability. Emergency situation developing." Aaron responded with characteristic composure. "Consecutive executive meetings throughout afternoon. Will return home approximately 7 p.m. When Aaron arrived home that evening, Melissa was already present, her eyes visibly inflamed from prolonged crying, a half-consumed wine glass clutched desperately in her trembling hand. What catastrophe has occurred? He inquired, placing his briefcase carefully on the imported marble console. Melissa regarded him, her expression reflecting combined guilt and apprehension. I've committed a terrible transgression, Aaron. An unforgivable mistake with devastating potential consequences. Specifically, which category of mistake? She inhaled deeply, visibly gathering determination. Someone from my past relationship history. Before our connection initiated, we maintained significant emotional involvement, and recently he returned to San Francisco, and regrettably you engaged intimately with him, Aaron concluded dispassionately, his voice deliberately emotionless. Melissa's eyes widened perceptibly. How could you possibly? I possess comprehensive knowledge, Melissa, Aaron stated quietly. I'm aware of Nick's existence. I understand your intention to terminate our marriage once he permanently relocates from New York. I recognize my position as temporary emotional placeholder, a convenient interim arrangement. She visibly paled, blood draining from her face. That's impossible. You couldn't possibly. I overheard everything, Melissa. That specific morning when you were conversing with Jane in our kitchen. I returned home unexpectedly because my scheduled meeting had been canceled without notice. Tears cascaded down her perfectly contoured cheeks. Aaron, please understand. I experienced temporary confusion. I never genuinely intended. Discontinue immediately, he interrupted, raising his hand authoritatively. Cease perpetuating dishonesty. I've already consulted extensively with specialized legal counsel. Divorce documentation will arrive tomorrow through official channels. Absolutely not, she gasped incredulously. Aaron, we can absolutely resolve this situation constructively. Professional counseling represents a viable option. I acknowledge my catastrophic error, but I choose our partnership definitively. I genuinely desire preserving our marriage. Aaron laughed mirthlessly, producing sound devoid of authentic humor. You don't genuinely desire our marriage, Melissa. You covet exclusively the financial security and social position I provide while awaiting superior alternatives. That's fundamentally untrue, she protested desperately, reaching toward him imploringly. He deliberately stepped backward, maintaining physical separation. I've transferred precisely half our combined savings into my private account, exclusively what legally constitutes my rightful portion. The residential property remains predominantly registered under my legal ownership, as you've always understood. You have precisely 14 days to secure alternative living arrangements. You can't possibly implement these measures, she whispered, her features contorted with profound shock. I've already executed them irreversibly, Aaron replied with unwavering composure. Additionally, you should understand, Haley isn't your recently acquired friend. She's my long-standing university companion who traveled to San Francisco specifically to assist confirming my existing suspicions. Melissa stared at him with horrified realization. You deliberately orchestrated this scenario to entrap me? Incorrect, Melissa. You created this situation independently. I merely ensured obtaining irrefutable evidence. Does Nick possess this information? She asked with sudden desperation. Have you informed him directly? Unnecessary disclosure. Nick Anderson maintains an established marriage with a 2-year-old son, has maintained that status for approximately 3 years. Perhaps he neglected mentioning those details during your romantic San Diego excursion? Melissa's legs visibly weakened, causing her to collapse onto their designer sofa. You're fabricating this information maliciously. Aaron extracted his smartphone, accessed a specific photograph, and presented the screen to her. The image displayed Nick with his arm affectionately encircling an attractive brunette woman, a cheerful toddler balanced on his opposite hip. All 3 subjects beamed happily toward the camera. The digital timestamp confirmed capture within the previous week. His wife's name is Rebecca Anderson. She believes his extended working hours at the office when he's actually conducting his affair with you. Melissa stared transfixed at the photographic evidence, her hands visibly trembling. You expressed desire for increased excitement and reduced predictability, Aaron stated with quiet intensity. Congratulations on achieving precisely those objectives. He turned decisively and ascended their sweeping staircase to the designated guest suite, where he had already relocated his essential belongings. He closed the door firmly, effectively silencing her increasingly hysterical sobbing. The subsequent 14 days passed in a blur of legal consultations, financial reorganizations, and uncomfortably silent shared meals. Melissa oscillated erratically between tearful reconciliation attempts and venomous accusations. "You never genuinely loved me," she spat bitterly one particularly tense evening. "Not authentically. A husband experiencing genuine love doesn't methodically dismantle his wife's entire existence. A wife experiencing genuine love doesn't systematically orchestrate her husband's replacement with a former romantic interest." Aaron countered with unwavering composure. On Melissa's final day, occupying their shared residence, Aaron returned home to discover her sitting desolately in their nearly vacant living room. Most furnishings legally belonged to him, purchased before their marriage, and he had permitted her to remove exclusively items she had contributed to their shared household. "Where will you relocate?" he inquired, motivated more by basic courtesy than authentic concern. "Jane has generously offered temporary accommodation until I secure permanent arrangements," Melissa responded listlessly. "She maintains you've demonstrated remarkable restraint in not claiming everything outright." Aaron nodded acknowledgement. "Her assessment is accurate." Melissa gazed up at him, her eyes rimmed with redness from sustained crying. "I did genuinely love you, Aaron, initially. Perhaps momentarily," he conceded. "However, authentic love transcends temporary emotional states, Melissa. It represents deliberate daily commitment. You discontinued choosing me extensively before this culmination. And you instantaneously stopped choosing me the moment you overheard that conversation," she countered accusingly. "Incorrect," Aaron stated definitively. "I discontinued choosing you exclusively when I recognized your commitment was perpetually conditional." As Melissa prepared to leave for the final time, she paused at the doorway, turning back to face him. In that moment, the facade completely crumbled, revealing raw vulnerability beneath. "What will happen to me now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, Aaron felt a flicker of compassion. Not enough to alter his course, but enough to acknowledge the human tragedy unfolding before him. "You'll survive, Melissa," he said quietly. "You're resilient. You always have been." A single tear slid down her cheek. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Not like this." "I believe you," Aaron replied, surprising himself with the realization that he actually did. "But intentions and actions are different things. We're defined by what we do, not what we mean to do." She nodded, a small broken gesture. Then she walked out the door without looking back. Following Melissa's departure, Aaron stood solitary within their silent residence, experiencing unusual emotional emptiness. Not sadness or lingering anger, simply profound vacancy. He opened an aged whiskey bottle, poured a generous portion, and carried it onto their expansive rear terrace. The setting sun painted the horizon with spectacular orange and purple gradients. His phone vibrated with a message from Haley. "How are you managing emotionally?" "Adequately," he responded concisely. "Renewed appreciation for your invaluable assistance." "Would companionship prove beneficial?" Aaron considered this proposition momentarily. "Perhaps tomorrow evening. Tonight requires solitary processing." "Completely understandable. Contact immediately if needs develop." He replaced the phone and sipped his premium whiskey contemplatively, observing silently as daylight gradually transitioned into darkness. Approximately 6 weeks later, Aaron was establishing his restructured routine when he received an unanticipated visitor. Jane stood hesitantly on his doorstep, appearing visibly uncomfortable. "May I speak with you briefly?" she requested tentatively. Aaron stepped aside, permitting entrance. "What specific matter requires discussion?" "Melissa's current situation," Jane stated, perching cautiously on the sofa's edge. "She's experiencing severe difficulties adjusting." "That no longer constitutes my legitimate concern," Aaron replied, deliberately remaining standing. Jane nodded acknowledgement. "I understand completely. For whatever minimal value this information holds, I actively attempted dissuading her from her destructive course. That specific morning in your kitchen, following your undetected departure, I strenuously advised recognizing her catastrophic mistake, yet you maintained her confidence regardless. She represented my closest friend, Jane explained simply. However, you similarly hold that status. That explains my current presence. What specific development necessitates this visit? Aaron inquired, despite his better judgment. Nick has completely rejected further contact with her, Jane revealed. Apparently, his wife discovered their illicit relationship and threatened custody litigation regarding their child. He informed Melissa he never wishes any future communication permanently. Aaron shrugged dismissively. Again, irrelevant to my current circumstances. She lost her employment position last week, Jane continued determinedly. Couldn't maintain concentration, repeatedly committed significant professional errors. Her financial situation prevents independent living arrangements. What specific action are you suggesting, Jane? Reconciliation? Jane shook her head emphatically. Absolutely not. That would undoubtedly damage you both irreparably. I simply believed you deserved knowing the situation's resolution. She's discussing relocating to Ohio, returning to her parents' residence. Aaron remained silent momentarily. That likely represents her optimal available option. Probably correct, Jane agreed, standing to depart. I should leave now. I simply felt somehow obligated to inform you regarding the conclusion of this unfortunate narrative. Following Jane's departure, Aaron poured himself a measured drink and settled on his rear terrace, his newly established evening ritual. He contemplated Melissa, reflecting on their constructed life together and its catastrophic dissolution. He briefly experienced fleeting compassion, but it rapidly dissipated. She had made her decisions independently. 2 days subsequently, he received correspondence from Melissa. Inside was handwritten communication. Aaron, I harbor no expectations regarding your forgiveness. I recognize my complete unworthiness. However, I want to ensure you understand I now recognize the invaluable relationship I carelessly destroyed. You never represented a temporary substitute. You embodied authentic partnership, yet I remain blind to that reality. I'm relocating permanently to Ohio, beginning completely anew. I sincerely hope someday you discover someone truly deserving your exceptional qualities. Farewell permanently, Melissa. Aaron carefully folded the letter and placed it within a drawer. Then he retrieved his phone and contacted Haley. Hello, he greeted when she answered. Would you enjoy sharing dinner this evening? I'd absolutely appreciate that opportunity, she responded warmly. Your residence or mine? Perhaps an entirely different location? Aaron suggested thoughtfully. I believe appropriate timing exists for meaningful changes. That weekend, Aaron listed their marital residence for immediate sale. Too many painful memories remained embedded within those architectural elements. He purchased a luxurious condominium closer to downtown, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows providing spectacular bay views. 6 months following their divorce finalization, Aaron received a text message from an unidentified number. Notice the property finally sold. Congratulations on the successful closure. Hope you're thriving personally. M. He studied the message extensively before permanently deleting it without responding. That evening, while he and Haley strolled along the waterfront following an elegant dinner, she inquired thoughtfully, Do you ever experience regret regarding how your marriage concluded? Aaron considered her question with characteristic thoroughness. I regret the necessity of such dramatic termination. However, I harbor no regrets regarding the relationship's conclusion itself. Haley nodded understanding. From objective perspective, I believe you managed the situation with significantly more dignity than most individuals would demonstrate. I never sought revenge, Aaron stated quietly. I simply desired extraction with personal integrity preserved. And did you achieve that objective? Aaron gazed contemplatively across the bay, observing city lights reflecting upon the darkened water. Affirmative, he concluded definitively. I believe that goal was successfully accomplished. As they continued their leisurely promenade, Aaron experienced something previously absent for extended duration, genuine optimism regarding future possibilities. He had weathered an emotional tempest and emerged on its opposite side, perhaps not completely unscathed, but fundamentally intact. 3 months later, Aaron received an unexpected phone call from Jane. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. Melissa attempted suicide last night. Aaron felt his blood run cold. Is she... She survived, Jane assured him quickly. Her mother found her. Pills. She's in the hospital now. Aaron closed his eyes, processing this information. I'm sorry to hear that. There's more, Jane continued hesitantly. She left a note, mostly for her parents, but she mentioned you, said she couldn't live with what she'd done, the person she'd become. Aaron remained silent for a long moment. Thank you for telling me. Will you call her? Jane asked. I'm not suggesting reconciliation or even forgiveness. Just, she's in a very dark place, Aaron. I'll think about it, he promised, ending the call. That night, Aaron sat alone on his terrace, staring out at the bay. Haley had offered to come over, but he'd needed solitude to process his conflicting emotions. Part of him felt responsible, though rationally he knew Melissa had created this situation through her own choices. Another part felt vindicated, though that brought its own shame. After much contemplation, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he thought he'd never call again. Hello, Melissa's mother answered, her voice weary. Mrs. Parker, it's Aaron Clark. I heard about Melissa. How is she doing? Aaron, the older woman breathed. They're keeping her for observation, psychiatric evaluation. They're saying severe depression, possibly borderline personality disorder. I'm very sorry, Aaron said sincerely. Would it be helpful if I spoke with her? There was a pause. I don't know, Aaron. She's very fragile right now. The doctors say she needs to focus on getting better, not reopening old wounds. I understand. Please tell her. Aaron paused, unsure what message to send. Tell her I hope she finds peace. 2 weeks later, Aaron received another call from Jane. Melissa's being transferred to a long-term residential treatment facility, she informed him. Her parents found a good place in Vermont specializing in trauma and depression. That sounds positive, Aaron responded. Professional help is what she needs most right now. Her mother asked me to give you a message, Jane continued. She said Melissa had a moment of clarity yesterday. She told her mother to tell you she finally understands that you weren't the substitute. She was. Aaron felt something shift inside him. A weight he hadn't realized he was still carrying seemed to lighten. Thank you for telling me. 6 months later, Melissa's parents contacted Aaron with devastating news. Despite the intensive therapy and constant supervision, Melissa had managed to take her own life. She had left separate letters for her parents, for Jane, and for Aaron. Aaron sat alone in his study, staring at the unopened envelope bearing his name. Haley had offered to be present when he read it, but this was something he needed to face alone. Finally, he carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Aaron, by the time you read this, I will have found the peace that has eluded me since destroying our marriage. I want you to know that my actions were never about you. They were about a fundamental emptiness inside me that I mistakenly thought others could fill. You gave me everything a woman could want: security, respect, affection, stability. But I was too broken to recognize the value of what I had. I chased a fantasy with Nick because it was easier than facing my own inadequacies. The psychiatrists here have helped me understand that I suffer from a personality disorder that makes me sabotage anything good in my life. I convinced myself that what I have isn't enough, that something better waits around the corner. But there was nothing better than what we had, and I was too blind to see it. Please know that you bear no responsibility for my choices. You were the best husband anyone could ask for. The fault was entirely mine. I hope you found happiness with someone worthy of your love. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. Goodbye, Aaron, and thank you for the years of love I was too damaged to properly return. Melissa. Aaron carefully folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box where he kept his most significant mementos. He walked to the window, gazing out at the sunset over the bay, feeling a complex mixture of sorrow, closure, and finally release. That evening, as Haley slept peacefully beside him, Aaron reflected on the strange, twisting path that had led him here. He had lost a marriage but gained something perhaps more valuable: authentic connection with someone who chose him completely, without reservation. Sometimes the most crushing blow is simply the truth, revealed at exactly the right moment. But sometimes that same truth becomes the foundation for building something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more beautiful than what was lost. In Melissa's final message, she had given Aaron the one thing she never could in life, the understanding that he had always been enough. And in that understanding, he found the freedom to fully embrace the future that awaited him.